Room hums like it's alive. Rows of servers blink in uneven rhythms, green lights stuttering, pausing, then racing again. The sound is constant, a low mechanical breathing that fills the narrow space and presses against the ears. Cold air spills from vents overhead, sharp enough to sting the skin. A clock appears on one of the monitors. No explanation, just numbers. Upload 41%. The percentage ticks upward. A man in a dark suit steps back from the console, his shoes scraping softly against the floor. Someone else swears under their breath. Another reaches for an earpiece, then freezes as if realizing too late that there's no one listening on the other end. The door at the far end of the room is sealed, heavy, reinforced, the kind that doesn't open unless someone on the outside wants it to, or unless it's forced. A warning flashes briefly across a screen, gone before anyone can read it fully. Sync error. The percentage jumps. 46%. No, someone says, quiet, almost hopeful. That's not possible. No one answers him. The man standing closest to the center terminal doesn't move. He's taller than the rest, shoulders squared, jaw tight. The glow from the screens cuts across his face in sharp lines, highlighting the calm in his eyes. Not fear, not yet, just calculation. He watches the number climb. Behind him, two men in black suits exchange looks. One of them reaches inside his jacket, then stops, hand hovering there, unsure what a weapon would even solve in a room full of machines. A sharp metallic bang echoes down the corridor outside. Not a gunshot, a test strake. The door trembles, dust falling from the frame. Someone exhales too loudly. The percentage climbs again. 52%. A voice breaks the tension. If it completes, the transfer is irreversible. Another voice snaps back. Transfer of what? Silence answers. Because no one knows. Not really. They know what they were told. They know what they signed off on. They know what was supposed to happen later. Quietly, legally, without alarms. This wasn't supposed to start now. The servers flare brighter, light reflecting off glass and steel. Code scrolls faster than the eye can follow. Lines stack on top of each other, folding inward as if the system is eating itself. 59%. The man at the center finally shifts his weight, just slightly, enough to signal attention. He says, "Shut it down." The words are calm, flat, used to being obeyed. Hands fly over keyboards, commands are entered, overrides attempted. Red text flashes back in response. Access denied. Someone laughs once, sharp and panicked. "That's not funny," he says, even though no one joked. Another impact slams into the door, harder this time. The metal groans, bowing inward for a fraction of a second before settling back into place. A crack appears along the frame. The percentage keeps moving. 63%. Sweat beads at the base of a man's neck. He wipes it away with the back of his hand, smearing it across his collar. "We're out of time," he mutters. The room feels smaller now, the walls closer, the air heavier. Near the far wall, almost outside the center of the chaos, a woman stands with a cleaning cart angled beside her. The wheels are locked. The cart hasn't moved in minutes. She wears a plain uniform, nothing that draws attention. Blue and black fabric, neat, practical. Her hair's pulled back tightly, not a strand out of place. Her posture is still, almost invisible, as if she's learned how to take up as little space as possible. No one looks at her. They don't notice the way her eyes flick from screen to screen, the way her head tilts slightly, listening not just to the shouting, but to the rhythm beneath it, the servers, the timing, the pattern in the way the percentage jumps. 67%. A man near the console whispers, "It's accelerating." Another one says, "That's not how uploads work." The woman tightens her grip on the handle of the cart, just a little. The door slams again. This time a hinge shrieks in protest. The crack widens. "Who's on the other side?" asks someone. No answer comes back. The man in the center finally turns his head. His gaze sweeps the room, sharp and assessing, taking inventory. Men, screens, doors, exits that no longer matter. His eyes pass over the woman and move on. 72%. A new line of text appears on the main monitor. Smaller, almost hidden beneath the data. The woman's eyes lock onto it. Her breathing slows. The man closest to her swears again. "It's not stopping! Nothing's stopping it!" The percentage jumps. 75%. The woman swallows. Another impact hits the door. The frame bends inward. Light from the hallway spills through the gap in a thin, violent line. Someone shouts for weapons. Someone else shouts for orders. The man in the center raises one hand. Silence snaps into place. Immediate. Absolute. 78%. He doesn't look at the door. He doesn't look at the men. He looks at the screens. The woman speaks. Her voice is quiet, steady, almost apologetic, as if she's afraid of interrupting. "That's not an upload," she says. Every head turns. The percentage freezes for half a second, then resumes. 81%. "It's a handover," she continues, "and it's already halfway done." No one asks how she knows. No one breathes. The countdown continues. The man who commands the room never raises his voice. He doesn't need to. When he enters, conversations thin out on their own. Chairs shift, spines straighten, eyes lift, then drop just as quickly. Fear doesn't announce itself. It settles, quiet, patient, like dust. The private restaurant room is already prepared when he arrives, table polished to a mirror finish, glasses aligned perfectly, contracts stacked in neat, precise piles, edges squared as if even paper understands discipline here. Men in expensive suits stand when he steps inside, not out of respect, out of instinct. He pauses just long enough for the silence to deepen, then sits. Only then does the room breathe again. This is how it always works. He controls space without touching it, time without chasing it, people without naming them. His power isn't loud, it's procedural. It lives in systems, routines, habits that never break because breaking them has consequences. He folds his jacket neatly over the back of his chair, rolls his sleeves once. Not hurried, never hurried. He glances at the documents in front of him, not to read them yet, but to confirm their presence. Everything accounted for. Everything in order. The men across from him wait. Their smiles are thin, professional, the kind that don't reach the eyes. They know better than to speak first. He built this empire without spectacle. No headlines, no myths that required exaggeration, just accumulation. Territory folded into territory, influence layered until it felt inevitable. Losing is not something he recognizes as a concept that applies to him. He reaches for a glass of water just as it's set down. The movement is smooth, practiced. The woman who serves it doesn't meet his eyes. She places the glass carefully, fingers steady, then steps back to the wall with the rest of the staff. Blue and black uniform, hair pulled tight, expression neutral. She becomes part of the room the moment she stops moving. He doesn't notice her. He rarely notices anyone who doesn't announce themselves as a problem. Across the table, one of the suited men clears his throat. The terms are exactly as discussed. No one interrupts him. That's permission enough. The speaker slides a folder forward, stopping it precisely at the center of the table, as if there's an invisible line he won't cross. The man at the head of the table opens it slowly. Pages turn. Once. Twice. Numbers, clauses, timelines. Clean. He nods, almost imperceptibly, not approval, confirmation. This deal matters, not because it's risky, because it's large enough to consolidate what he already controls into something unassailable. Routes, shell companies, legal insulations so thick it could smother suspicion before it ever formed. This is what everything looks like. Not cash, not guns, not men. Infrastructure. Across the room, the woman by the wall watches reflections instead of faces. The glossy surface of the table mirrors hands, movements, the subtle tremor in one man's wrist when the pages turn too slowly. She hears tone shifts others miss, the way one voice tightens around certain phrases, the way another rushes past a clause that deserves more air. She doesn't write anything down. She never does. The man at the head of the table closes the folder. The sound is soft, but it lands like punctuation. "Who drafted this?" he asks calmly, tapping one page with a finger. "And why is this clause buried?" No accusation, just interest. The men across from him freeze for half a second too long. One answers, another nods, a third adds unnecessary clarification. He listens without reacting. Control isn't about intimidation, it's about patience. He leans back in his chair, folding his hands together, gaze drifting to the window for just a moment. The city stretches beyond the glass, orderly, predictable. His. This deal would ensure that nothing touches what he's built. No investigations, no leaks, no slow erosion from within. Unthinkable otherwise. Behind him, the woman shifts her weight slightly, just enough to ease tension in her legs. Her eyes flick to the folder when it closes, then to the men who suddenly won't meet each other's gaze. She doesn't know the full scope. She doesn't need to. She recognizes pressure when she hears it. Another glass is poured, another agreement murmured. The man at the table lifts his pen, then sets it down again. Not yet. Across the table, relief tries to bloom. He notices that too. "Step outside," he says to one of the men, not loudly, not angrily. The man obeys immediately. The door closes, the lock clicks. Inside the room, the temperature seems to drop a degree. "This deal," he says evenly, "assumes trust." No one disagrees. They nod, perhaps too quickly. "Trust," he continues, "is a liability." A beat passes. The woman by the wall lowers her eyes, but her attention sharpens. She's heard him speak like this before, right before things change. He opens the folder again, slower this time. "This clause," he says, tapping the page once more, "creates a delay window." The men across the table exchange glances. Someone swallows. "Standard," one says. "Nothing here is standard," he replies. Silence stretches. He closes the folder again, firmer now. The pen remains untouched. Behind the glass walls of the restaurant, waitstaff move quietly. Plates slide, footsteps pass. Life continues, unaware of how thin the margin is in this room. The woman adjusts the grip on her tray. She notices a flicker on the screen discreetly near the corner of the room. Just a blink. Green lights stuttering out of rhythm with the rest. No one else looks. She stores it away. The man at the table rises. Every chair scrapes back instantly. He buttons his jacket, movements precise. "We will resume," he says, "when I'm satisfied." The words land heavy, expensive. As he turns, the server screen flickers again, longer this time. A single line appears, gone before anyone reacts. The woman sees it. Her breath catches, then steadies. He pauses at the door, hand resting on the handle, as if something unseen has tugged at him. He doesn't know why. He looks back at the table, at the men, at the untouched pen. For the first time that evening, unease slips through the cracks. Somewhere deeper in the building, a system hymn changes pitch. A vibration runs through the air, subtle, easy to miss. The woman lowers her eyes again, face unreadable. The message appears once more. No one can explain it. And the man who never noticed her doesn't yet realize that everything has already begun to shift. Power doesn't fracture all at once. It thins first. The man learns this an hour after leaving the restaurant, standing in a glass-walled conference room high above the city, watching screens update in real time. Numbers scroll. Accounts reconcile. Systems report green. Too green. He has lived long enough inside controlled chaos to recognize when calm is staged. "Run it again," he says. No one asks why. Analysts move instantly, fingers flying, eyes flicking between monitors. They are the best he has. People selected not for brilliance alone, but for discretion. People who understand that silence is as valuable as skill. The data refreshes. Still clean. Still perfect. That's the problem. He steps closer to the screens, jacket draped over one shoulder now, sleeves rolled again. He studies the flow. Transactions threading through layers of shell companies, bouncing jurisdictions, dissolving into legitimate channels before resurfacing somewhere else. It's elegant. It's also wrong. There's a delay he can feel but not yet see, like standing too close to a storm you know is coming, air heavy, pressure off by a fraction. "Show me the compliance audit," he says. One analyst hesitates. Not enough to be obvious, enough to matter. It passed, every checkpoint. He nods. "Show me anyway." The screens shift. As they do, a maintenance worker moves quietly along the back wall, wiping down surfaces that are already clean. Blue and black uniform, gloves, hair pulled back tight. Her cart squeaks softly, just once, before she steadies it. No one notices her. She doesn't want them to. The audit files load. Dense, boring by design. He scans them faster than anyone expects, eyes trained to catch pattern breaks rather than details. There, a timestamp anomaly, 37 seconds unaccounted for between two verification logs. In any other system, it would mean nothing. Here, it's a hairline crack. "Why is this window empty?" he asks. The analyst leans in, frowns. It shouldn't be. Yet it is. The room tightens. The maintenance worker pauses at a server rack, pretending to adjust a cable that doesn't need adjusting. Her gaze tracks the screen reflections. She's already seen the gap, saw it hours ago. That's why she's here. "Run a trace on every authority that touched this file," he orders, internal and external. A pause. "That could flag interest," someone says carefully. He looks at them. Just looks. The objection dies in the air. The trace begins. Across the city, systems stir. Quiet alarms wake. Legal entities shift from dormant to active. Compliance watchdogs blink from sleep. Pressure doesn't announce itself with sirens. It arrives with paperwork. His phone buzzes. Once. He doesn't pick it up immediately. When he does, the voice on the other end is clipped, formal, cautious in a way that pretends to be respectful. There's been a development, a review, routine, of course. Of course, he replies. The maintenance worker resumes wiping a surface already spotless. Her breathing stays even. How long? He asks. Audit teams are mobilizing. Some documents have been flagged. He ends the call without ceremony. The room fills with low voices now, analysts speaking faster, questions stacking, screens multiplying. He raises one hand. Silence snaps back into place. Lock external access, he says. Pull backups offline. That may look defensive, someone says. It is defensive. The truth sits between them, unspoken. Defensive means exposed. The maintenance worker moves again, this time closer to the central console. She swaps a cloth, adjusts a tablet on her cart. The screen flickers briefly, hidden behind her body. A countdown begins. She sees it start. No one else does. Where's this originating? He asks. We can't find a source. It's everywhere and nowhere. Legal. Clean. Nothing this clean is accidental. His jaw tightens. He doesn't raise his voice. That would mean reacting. Instead, he does something rare. He sits. The chair slides back slightly as he lowers himself, hands resting flat on the table. For a moment, he says nothing. The room waits. This is where most men would reach for violence, threaten, demand loyalty, purge uncertainty with blood. He doesn't. Violence draws attention. This threat lives in files, timestamps, compliance frameworks designed to look harmless until they suffocate you. He looks around the room, at faces he's known for years, at loyalty measured in results, not affection. Isolation creeps in, not because they abandon him, but because none of them can fix this quickly. Who else knows? He asks. No one answers immediately. That's answer enough. Another phone buzzes. Then another. Then another. He doesn't answer any of them. Doors slide shut automatically as lockdown protocols engage. Soft clicks echo through the space. Elevators pause. External lines dim. Phones lose signal one by one. The city outside keeps moving, unaware that a sealed room high above it has just become a pressure chamber. The maintenance worker stops cleaning. She stands very still. The countdown on her concealed screen ticks down. Numbers, steady, unforgiving. He notices her then, not consciously, not fully, just a disturbance at the edge of his awareness, a presence that doesn't belong to the chaos pattern. Who authorized maintenance? He asks without looking at her. No one answers. She keeps her eyes down. Leave us, one of the analysts says sharply. She doesn't move. Now, the analyst repeats. She lifts her head just enough to meet the analyst's eyes, then lowers it again, subtle, non-confrontational, obedient on the surface. But she still doesn't leave. He turns his head finally. Their eyes meet for the first time. It's brief, but something in her expression is wrong for a woman who should be invisible. Not fear, focus. He studies her the way he studies systems, looking for tells, cracks, intent. She swallows once, then speaks, softly, controlled. Your files are being timed, she says. The room freezes. No one moves. No one breathes. He doesn't react immediately. He lets the moment stretch, measuring its weight. Explain, he says. She hesitates, not because she's unsure, because she's calculating risk. There's a compliance cascade. Once the first audit completes, it triggers the next, automatically. You won't be charged, you'll be buried. An analyst snaps to his feet. Who are you? She doesn't answer him. She looks at the man seated at the table. The delay you saw was a test. The countdown ticks louder now, though only she can hear it. How long? He asks. She glances down, then back up. Minutes. The lights dimmed slightly as the building shifts into full lockdown. Outside the room, doors seal, phones go completely silent. And for the first time in years, the man realizes that no amount of force can stop what has already been set in motion. She learned early that silence travels farther than words. In places like this, people talked constantly. Not loudly, not carelessly, but enough to leak truth through habit. Executives filling space with reassurance. Analysts narrating their own confidence. Men explaining things no one asked them to explain. Silence made her dangerous. The building shifted around her as lockdown settled in. Lights dimmed to a softer, controlled glow. Doors sealed with muted clicks that sounded final even when they weren't. The hum of the servers deepened, a steady, mechanical pulse that replaced conversation. She stood where she always stood when things went wrong, near a wall, close enough to hear, far enough to be ignored. The men in the room spoke in tighter sentences now, language compressed under pressure. Reroute compliance channels. That buys us seconds. Seconds aren't enough. She wiped down the edge of a console slowly, deliberately. The motion was routine, almost soothing. It gave her cover. People rarely look at what they believe they understand. She watched reflections instead of faces. Reflections told the truth faster. The man at the center of the room had gone quiet again. That was when he was most dangerous. When he wasn't issuing orders, he was mapping consequences. She'd seen him like this before, in passing, in fragments. He never panicked. Panic was for people who didn't plan past the first outcome. Her job had put her in rooms like this for months. Not just this one, others. Offices with tinted glass and bad coffee. Conference rooms that smelled faintly of fear, masked by expensive cologne. Places where decisions were framed as necessary, inevitable, temporary. She listened in all of them. Not for secrets, for patterns. The message that started this bothered her because it didn't behave like the others. Encrypted data had weight, shape, predictable resistance. You could feel it pushing back as you tried to read it, layers folding over layers. This didn't. It behaved like speech overheard through walls, familiar words out of order, meaning hiding between fragments. She'd heard it first days ago, bleeding through a maintenance terminal while she cleaned a corridor no one used unless something had gone wrong. A phrase repeated twice, 3 times, always truncated, always timed. She hadn't understood it then. She just recognized that it wasn't finished. Now, standing in the sealed room, she listened again. Not to the men, but to the system. Why isn't it escalating? One analyst asked. It is, just not visibly. The man at the table lifted his gaze slightly. Show me the cascade path. Screen shifted, lines branched, arrows multiplied. She caught the moment when the analyst stopped explaining and started guessing. That was important. She rolled her cart a few inches to the side, positioning herself closer to the central screen without appearing to move with intent. Her eyes traced the flow, not the code, the timing. Every trigger fired at a consistent interval, too consistent. Encryption scrambles time as much as data. This was orderly. That was when certainty began to settle. Her breathing slowed. She waited. The men argued quietly now, not with each other, with the problem. Each solution created another delay window, another silent countdown she could feel more than see. The man finally spoke again. Why does it pause here? An analyst shook his head. It shouldn't. It's like it's waiting. Waiting for what? No one asked. She knew. She set down the cloth in her hand and folded it once, neatly. Her movement stayed small, respectful, invisible. The system ticked forward again. A fragment flashed on the edge of one screen, gone too fast for most eyes. She caught it. A word, partial, familiar. Not code, language. Her pulse kicked once, hard, then settled. She didn't interrupt. She let the men circle the problem, voices overlapping slightly as tension rose. This was how trust formed, not by inserting herself too early, by proving she could wait. The man watched the screams without blinking. She spoke only when the room reached a precise balance, when confusion outweighed arrogance but hadn't yet tipped into desperation. "May I say something?" she asked. Her voice was calm, even, not apologetic, not challenging. The sentence landed harder than a shout. Every head turned. The man didn't answer immediately. He studied her the way he studied anomalies, not as a threat, as a variable. "Go on," he said. She nodded once. "It's not encrypted," she said, "not in the way you're treating it." Silence spread. One of the analysts scoffed reflexively, then stopped himself when the man didn't react. "What is it then?" the man asked. She took a breath, not to steady herself, to choose precision. "It's broken into pieces," she said, deliberately. A few analysts exchanged looks. She continued, eyes flicking briefly to the screens, as if reading from memory. Each fragment activates a different compliance trigger. Individually, they're harmless. Together, they form a sequence. "A sequence to what?" someone demanded. She hesitated for half a second, not because she didn't know, because saying it would change her position in the room permanently. The man waited. She met his gaze again. "It's a transfer of authority," she said, "executed legally, automatically, without accusations, without arrests." The words sat heavy. "That's impossible," an analyst said weakly. She shook her head once. "It's rare." The man leaned back slightly, fingers interlacing. His expression didn't change, but something in the room did. Attention narrowed, focus sharpened. "How do you know this?" he asked. She didn't answer directly. "I've heard the fragments before, in other buildings, other rooms, always spoken out of order, always dismissed." A beat passed. "You're saying someone planned this," he said. "Yes." "To dismantle everything without touching it?" "Yes." The room felt smaller again, not because of fear, now because of clarity. The man looked back at the screens, at the flow he'd misread as clean. "How much time?" he asked. She glanced down at the concealed tablet on her cart. The countdown pulsed steadily. "Less than you think," she said. The servers hummed on. The fragments aligned. And in the quiet that followed, she understood fully what she'd been hearing all along. The message wasn't hidden. It was incomplete. The room doesn't react all at once. Shock moves unevenly, like a wave hitting obstacles. One man stiffens, another blinks too fast. Someone inhales sharply and forgets to exhale. The sentence she spoke hangs in the air, unfinished in the minds of everyone who heard it. A transfer of authority, executed legally, automatically. The servers continue their low, relentless hum, indifferent to the sudden fracture in human certainty. Screens keep updating, lines keep branching. The countdown doesn't pause for comprehension. The man at the table is the last to move, not because he's slow, because he's deciding whether the room is still under his control. He rises slowly, chair sliding back without a sound, and steps closer to the central console. His presence shifts gravity. Conversations die. Analysts straighten without realizing they're doing it. The authority they're used to responding to reasserts itself, even now. "Stop all outgoing processes," he says. Hands move immediately. Commands are entered. Overrides attempted. Nothing changes. Red text blooms again. Process locked. The countdown ticks forward. Someone swears, louder than they should. Another analyst shakes their head in disbelief, fingers still moving, as if persistence alone might convince the system to listen. The man doesn't look at them. He looks at her. She stands where she stood before, near the wall, Cart beside her, blue and black uniform unwrinkled, hands steady, expression controlled. If she's afraid, she isn't letting it surface. That's what unsettles him most. Fear, he understands. This is something else. Say it again, he tells her. She doesn't repeat the sentence. She clarifies it. The system isn't stealing from you. It's replacing you. The words land harder the second time. One of the men across the room laughs once, sharp and brittle. That's not how authority works. She turns her head slightly toward him, not confrontational, observational. It is, if the authority is pre-consented. The laughter dies. The man at the table lifts a hand. Silence falls again. How, he asks her, does a cleaner know this? The question isn't an insult, it's an assessment. He's already moved past disbelief. He's calibrating. She doesn't answer immediately. Not because she can't, because she knows that once she does, the room will never see her the same way again. The countdown jumps. 64%. An analyst speaks too quickly. If we can identify the initiating node, you won't, she interrupts gently. Every head snaps toward her. That node doesn't exist anymore. It handed off responsibility in the layers. Each layer thinks it's following protocol. The man studies her face for a long moment. Who benefits? He asks her. She hesitates. That hesitation is enough. A few men shift uncomfortably. Eyes flick toward each other, then away. The temperature in the room drops another degree. The man notices. His gaze sharpens. Answer the question. She chooses her words carefully. Whoever no longer needs to be visible. The implication spreads. One of the suited men near the back straightens abruptly. This is speculation. The man at the table turns toward him slowly. No, he says, voice flat. This is pattern. He steps closer to the main screen, studying the cascade paths with new eyes. The structure is suddenly obvious to him. Elegant. Cruel. Designed by someone who understands systems and human behavior equally well. He says, this was built to look like compliance, to feel inevitable. She nods once. The countdown continues. 68%. Why now? Someone asks. Why trigger it tonight? She looks at the man again. Because tonight you sign. Silence slams into place. The pen on the table feels louder than the servers now. One sentence. That's all it took. The deal isn't just compromised, it's weaponized. The man reaches for the folder and flips it open again, scanning clauses he's read 100 times. This time, he sees what was hidden in plain sight. Language that seemed protective, now sharp with intent. Safeguards that activate only under specific conditions. Conditions that are currently being met. Close the room, he orders. It's already closed. Lock it tighter. Security protocols escalate. Internal shutters slide over glass walls. Access lights shift from green to amber. Someone reaches for a phone. No signal. Another tries a different device. Nothing. Isolation settles fully now. Not just physical, strategic. The man straightens and turns back to her. You stopped the signing. Yes, you delayed the transfer. For now. For how long? She glances down at her concealed screen. The numbers glow steadily. Minutes, she repeats. A murmur ripples through the room. He studies her again, slower this time, not as an anomaly, as a variable he underestimated. You could have stayed invisible. Why say anything? The question is quieter than the others, more dangerous. She meets his eyes. Because you were about to make it irreversible. The servers hum on. The countdown accelerates slightly. 72%. Remove her, one of the suited men snapped suddenly, tension breaking through his composure. 2 security men move instinctively. The man at the table doesn't raise his voice. No. The word stops them cold. He doesn't take his eyes off her. You've changed the equation. That makes you a liability. She nods once. Acceptance, not fear. But you're also the only person in this room who understands the full shape of the threat. A beat passes. How? He asks finally. How did you see what we didn't? The question isn't loud. It doesn't need to be. She looks at the screens one last time, at the fragments aligning, at the clock bleeding forward. Then she looks back at him and says nothing. The countdown continues. It begins not with shouting, but with space. A step backward, a chair scraping the floor, a subtle widening of the distance between her and the table. The room has understood something before the people in it have. Curiosity has crossed a line. Knowledge has weight now, and weight demands force. The man senses it immediately. He raises his hand again, but this time the gesture doesn't carry the same authority. It's a fraction slower. The room hesitates before obeying. That hesitation is new. The countdown reaches 74%. One of the suited men near the door speaks, voice tight. She's compromised the process. That makes her a threat. No one contradicts him. Another man adds, quieter but sharper, we don't know who else she's spoken to. The word else lingers. The cleaner stands very still. Her cart is beside her, one hand resting lightly on its handle as if it's the only solid thing left in the room. Her posture hasn't changed, but the atmosphere around her has. The air presses inward. The man at the table turns his head slightly, tracking the subtle movements. Security has shifted. Not overtly, not yet, but their positions are no longer neutral. You will not touch her, he says. This time, the room doesn't freeze. It tightens. A security man near the wall glances at another. A silent exchange, protocol versus opportunity. The suited man who spoke earlier steps forward half a pace. With respect, he says, this situation is already out of control. The man at the table looks at him calmly. Because you allowed it to be. That lands hard. The suited man's jaw flexes. We need to contain variables. The cleaner's eyes flick briefly to the exits. All sealed, amber light steady, no obvious path. Containment is not theoretical anymore. The countdown ticks to 76%. Step away from the wall, the suited man says to her, tone clipped, rehearsed. She doesn't move. Not defiance. Calculation. The man notices. He steps slightly forward, placing himself closer to her line of sight without fully turning his back on the room. She stays where she is, he says. One of the other men laughs, sharp and humorless. You're protecting her because she's useful. That doesn't make her safe. The implication is clear. The man's eyes darken. Neither does threatening her. The tension snaps. A hand moves inside a jacket. Not fast. Not dramatic. Enough. The security men react instantly. Positions harden. The room is no longer a meeting. It's a standoff. The cleaner feels it before she sees it. Her breath shortens. Her shoulders tense despite her control. She lowers her gaze, not in submission, but to hide the flicker of fear she refuses to let them exploit. The man sees that, too. He steps fully between her and the table. That movement changes everything. Enough, he says. The word lands heavier than the others. This deal, he continues, is already compromised. If anyone here thinks escalating will save them, they misunderstand the situation. The suited man near the door scoffs. You're stalling. Yes, the man replies evenly, and I'm very good at it. The countdown reaches 89%. An analyst speaks from the console, voice strained. We're losing override windows. If we don't... I know, the man says without turning. The cleaner finally speaks again, softly. They don't care about the transfer completing. Every head turns. They care about who panics first, because panic reveals intent. The suited men react instantly. One takes a step back, another folds his arms too tightly, a third looks at the floor. The man at the table watches them all. "This room," he says slowly, "is not unified." No one responds. "That," he continues, "means the threat is not external." The suited man nearest the exit snaps. "This is absurd. She's a cleaner. You're letting—" "She's been listening," the cleaner says suddenly. The words cut through the argument like glass. Listening. Weeks. The room freezes in a different way now. The man turns his head towards her slowly. She lifts her eyes to meet his. "Yes," she says. "Weeks." The suited man explodes. "That's impossible." It's not. Not when people assume silence equals ignorance. The man's expression doesn't change, but something tightens behind his eyes. "What have you heard?" he asks. She hesitates for half a second. That hesitation is fear. Then she decides fear is no longer useful. "Everything," she says. The word lands heavier than a confession. She continues, voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "You talk like the room is empty, like the walls don't remember, like the people who clean up after you don't exist." One of the suited men lunges forward. "She's fishing." "She's accurate," the man at the table says quietly. The lunge stops. "You discussed contingencies, fallback authorities, proxy leadership, automatic transfers. You joked about it, about how clean it would be." She looks at the man now. "You never joked." Silence. The countdown hits 82%. An analyst speaks from the console, voice strained. "We're losing override windows if we don't—" "Exactly," the cleaner says. "That's why you're nervous." The room shifts again. Fear replaces irritation. The man steps closer to her, lowering his voice. "Why tell me now?" "Because until tonight, you still had a choice. And now?" "Now you don't. Unless you trust me." The idea hangs there, dangerous, absurd, necessary. A security man receives a silent signal from one of the suited men and takes a step towards her. The man moves faster. He places himself fully in front of her. "No," he says, louder now. The suited man snarls, "You're choosing her over us." "I'm choosing reality," the man replies. The countdown reaches 85%. The room is no longer divided. It's fractured, and everyone knows the next move won't be verbal. Behind the man's shoulder, the cleaner exhales slowly. Weeks of listening. Weeks of fragments, weeks of waiting for the moment when silence would no longer save anyone. She never planned to speak, but once understanding becomes dangerous, silence becomes lethal. The countdown continues. The room doesn't erupt. That's what makes it worse. After the cleaner's confession, after the word everything lands and settles into the air like dust after an explosion, no one moves. No one shouts. No guns appear. The suited men don't rush her. Security doesn't advance. Instead, the room does something far more dangerous. It thinks. The man stands where he placed himself, body a barrier without theatrics. His presence is controlled, but inside him something has shifted. Not fear, recognition. The countdown ticks past 86%. "Show me," he says. The cleaner doesn't hesitate this time. She steps forward, just enough to reach the table. She doesn't touch the documents. She doesn't need to. "Your message," she says. "The one that keeps repeating." A suited man scoffs. "You're telling us you decoded a system you don't even—" "It isn't a system," she interrupts gently. "It's a pattern." Silence again. She looks around the room, eyes moving from face to face. "You think complexity hides intent. It doesn't. It just delays understanding." She gestures toward the contract. "Those clauses don't stand alone. They echo." The man's gaze sharpens. "Explain." "They're written by different firms," she says, "but they use the same fallback language, same redundancies, same phrasing when ownership dissolves." One of the suited men stiffens. The cleaner notices immediately. She continues, That only happens when the same template is being reused, quietly, across time. The countdown hits 88%. The analyst at the console speaks, uncertain. "We assumed independent counsel." "You assumed," she replied, "because you were told to." The man turns his head slightly toward the analysts. "Cross-reference the clauses." They move fast now. Screens flicker, data overlays stack. The room fills with a low hum of processing. One analyst swallows. "There's overlap." "How much?" the man asks. "Enough," the analyst replies. "Shell firms feeding into the same holding structure. Ownership loops back through proxies." The suited man near the door snaps. "That doesn't mean—" "It means," the cleaner says, "that the deal was never about transfer." The room feels smaller. "It was about erasure," she adds. The word lands hard. The man exhales slowly through his nose. "Define erasure." She meets his eyes. "You step aside, temporarily. The system triggers legal protections that freeze your assets under review. While you wait, authority redistributes." "To whom?" he asks. She doesn't answer immediately. The countdown reaches 90%. One of the analysts looks up, voice strained. "The beneficiaries, they're internal." That does it. The room finally breaks. Voices overlap. Accusations flicker and die. Chairs scrape back. One suited man slams his palm on the table. "This is speculation." "No, this is architecture." He turns back to the cleaner. "You said it was fragmented." "Yes," she replied, "because no single clause incriminates anyone. But together—" She trails off. The man finishes it. "They tell a story." She nods. He looks around the room now, really looks, at the men he's worked beside for years, at the familiar rhythms of their breathing, at the tiny tells he's ignored because trust is efficient. "Who benefits?" he asks. The analyst answers reluctantly. "Interim authority defaults to the Oversight Council." A pause. The man's jaw tightens. "Which is chaired by—" No one says the name. They don't have to. The cleaner feels it before she understands it. The shift, the way the man's stillness sharpens into something colder. "That's why the message repeats," she says softly. "It isn't a warning. It's a trigger confirmation." The suited man near the door laughs weakly. "You're reaching." The man turns on him. "You've been quiet." "I'm listening," he replies. "So was she," the man says. The countdown passes 92%. "Explain the timing," the man says to the cleaner. "They waited until tonight because tonight you're surrounded by witnesses who benefit from your compliance." The room understands that instantly. This was never a negotiation. It was theater. The man closes his eyes for a moment. When he opens them, something fundamental has shifted. "Every meeting," he says slowly, "every delay, every insistence on process." The cleaner nods. They built the trap slowly, so slowly it felt like governance. The analyst speaks again. "If the trigger completes, I lose operational control," the man says. "Legally. And violently, eventually." The suited men bristle. The man raises a hand. "She's right." Silence again. The countdown reaches 94%. He walks back to the table, not sitting this time. He places both palms flat on the surface, leaning in. "This room," he says, "has always believed power lives in force." He looks up. "But force is only useful when you own the rules." He straightens. "And someone here decided I shouldn't." A bead of sweat traces down one suited man's temple. The man notices. "You," he says quietly. The suited man stiffens. "That's an accusation." "It's an observation," the man replies. The cleaner watches closely. She hadn't known who, only that it would be someone close, someone trusted enough to stand near the center of the web. The suited man laughs again, louder this time. "You're unraveling because a cleaner told you a story." The man steps closer. "No, I'm unraveling because the story fits. The countdown hits 96%. The analyst whispers, "We're almost out of time." The man nods. "I know." He turns back to the cleaner. "Why didn't you leave?" She answers without hesitation, "Because the system doesn't stop with you." That lands deeper than anything else. If it works tonight, it becomes permanent, repeatable. "And you," he says, "noticed." "I listened," she replies, "and I clean." The man almost smiles. Almost. The suited man near the door steps backward, instinctively. "You're making a mistake." The man's voice drops. "You made yours weeks ago." The countdown reaches 98%. The analyst's hands shake. "If we don't interrupt the sequence—" "We will," the man says. "How?" the analyst asks. The man looks at the suited men, at the exits, at the cleaner. Then he looks at the one person who has avoided his gaze since the beginning. "Because the betrayer," he says calmly, "is still in this room." Silence crashes down. The countdown continues. The room settles into a dangerous quiet. Not the calm that comes after victory, not the silence of relief. This is the kind of stillness that follows understanding. The men around the table wait for an order. They always do. Shoulders squared, hands loose but ready, faces trained into neutrality, the kind learned over years of watching power change hands without warning. They are loyal, but not sentimental. Loyalty here has always been a transaction, never a belief. The boss stands at the head of the table, posture straight, expression unreadable. The lights overhead hum softly. Somewhere behind the walls, the building breathes. Air circulates. Systems continue. Nothing has collapsed yet. That is what unsettles him most. He looks at the documents again, the same pages that once represented expansion, control, inevitability. Ink, signatures, structures built to outlast men. He has enforced contracts with violence before, but he has never trusted them. Paper was never power. Fear was. And yet, tonight, paper almost ended him. Not because it was stronger than him, but because it didn't need him at all. The cleaner stands near the wall where she has always been. Blue and black uniform, sleeves rolled neatly, hair pulled back tight, exposing a face that reveals nothing unless you know how to look. She doesn't step forward. She doesn't retreat. She doesn't lower her eyes. She waits. He notices something then. Something small, but sharp. No one is watching her anymore. Not because she is invisible again, but because she has already crossed the line that made her dangerous. The boss exhales slowly. Not relief, calculation. Violence remains an option. It always will. He could order the room cleared. He could erase tonight and everyone in it. He could remind the system who he is by making an example so severe it would echo for years. That path is familiar, easy, almost comforting. But for the first time, he sees the cost clearly. Staying does not mean surviving. Staying means becoming permanent, a symbol. Symbols don't get to choose when they're done. Symbols are maintained, replaced, corrected when they drift. A symbol cannot age, cannot soften, cannot step away without consequence. He has watched it happen to others, men who ruled until they were no longer useful, men who mistook fear for permanence, men who thought the chair belonged to them. The system never corrects itself loudly. It replaces quietly. He looks at the cleaner again. "Speak," he says. It's not an order, it's an invitation. The men at the table stiffen. They don't like this. They don't like anything unscripted. Their world runs on hierarchy and anticipation. A cleaner does not get invited into decisions. She cleans after decisions. She steps forward just enough to be heard, not enough to be close. Her voice is calm, lower than expected. No tremor. They won't punish you, she says. The room tightens. They won't move tonight or tomorrow. She pauses, choosing her words with care. They'll let you think you won. He doesn't interrupt. Then they'll wait for the moment you stop being necessary. One of the men at the table shifts. Another clears his throat, then thinks better of it. The cleaner meets the boss's eyes directly now. They'll replace you. The words are quiet, almost gentle. They land like a fracture. He feels it immediately. Not anger, not fear, recognition. Because it explains everything. The clauses, the silence, the absence of urgency. The way no one panicked when the trap nearly closed. The system didn't need drama. It needed continuity. A symbol can be replaced without noise. He straightens slowly. The decision forms not as a burst of emotion, but as alignment, pieces sliding into place. If he stays, he will spend the rest of his life proving he is still needed, still sharp, still dangerous, still useful. If he leaves, the system loses nothing, but he gains something it can't replicate: choice. He looks at the men around him. These are not friends, they are witnesses. They will report what they see tonight in fragments: tone, body language, absence of blood. They will sense the shift even if they don't understand it. What happens if I disappear? He asks the cleaner. She doesn't answer immediately. When you stop showing up, the system keeps moving. That's not reassurance, it's truth. He nods once. A symbol would take that as an insult. A man takes it as freedom. He closes the folder in front of him. The sound is soft, but final. The pen beside it remains untouched. No signature. One of the men opens his mouth to speak. The boss lifts a hand. Not sharply, calmly. The room obeys. He turns slightly, angling his body away from the table. It's subtle, but everyone notices. Power here has always been directional. Where he faces is where the future goes. For the first time in years, he does not face forward. He faces the exit. The cleaner does not smile. She does not thank him. She does not step closer. She simply watches. He pauses beside her, close enough now to see the fine lines of exhaustion beneath her composure, close enough to understand the cost of listening in a world that kills messengers. You could have stayed silent, he says. Yes, she replies. He considers that. You didn't? No. Another pause. Why? Her answer is immediate. Because I clean after men like you, and I wanted to see one leave. The honesty disarms him more than fear ever could. He straightens, decision fully formed now, not rushed, not forced. Staying would make him eternal. Leaving would make him human. Behind them, the system waits, patient, unbothered. It does not chase those who step aside. It replaces them. He understands that now. And for the first time, he doesn't care. The moral line is clear. He does not cross it by killing. He crosses it by letting go. As he moves toward the door, no one stops him. Not because they can't, but because the system has already begun adjusting. The first sign of chaos is not noise. It's movement. A shift in posture, a chair scraping the floor just a second too late. A hand lifting, then hesitating, unsure whether to reach for a weapon or a phone or nothing at all. The room, moments ago frozen by understanding, begins to breathe again. And when it does, it inhales danger. The boss feels it before he sees it. This is the moment the system resists change. Someone speaks his name from across the room. Not loudly, not with authority, with uncertainty. That is worse. Uncertainty spreads faster than orders. It fractures loyalty. It creates initiative where none should exist. He turns back, not to reclaim the table, but to face the fracture head-on. The doors at the far end of the room open abruptly, too abruptly. Men step in who were not part of the original arrangement. Their presence answers a question no one wanted to ask. Back up. Not his. The cleaner stiffens beside the wall. Not in fear, in calculation. Her eyes flick to the corners of the room. Exits, angles, the distance between bodies. She has already moved past panic. Panic wastes time. The boss raises his hand again. The same calm gesture. This time, it doesn't stop everyone. That's fine. He doesn't need everyone. He steps forward, placing himself deliberately between the table and the incoming men. It's a quiet act of dominance, stripped of theatrics. No threats, no raised voice, just position. The room tightens. Someone shouts. Another voice answers. Orders overlap. Confusion bleeds into aggression. This is how violence usually begins. Not with intention, but with misalignment. He doesn't draw anything. He doesn't need to. Instead, he speaks. Low, precise, just loud enough. Enough. It shouldn't work, but it does. Not because they respect him, because they don't want to be the one who miscalculates this moment. The system thrives on inevitability. It collapses under hesitation. He uses that hesitation like a lever. Stand down, he says, not as a command, but as an outcome. Not because I asked, because tonight ends clean. Clean is a word they understand. Clean means no witnesses, no ripples, no questions later. The cleaner watches him closely now. She sees the choice he's making. This isn't dominance. This is containment. Someone laughs nervously. Another curses under his breath. The incoming men exchange glances. They were sent to finish something. They don't know what it is anymore. That uncertainty is enough. The room doesn't explode. It dissolves. Men step back. Phones are lowered. The air loses its sharpness, replaced by something heavier. Disappointment. Missed opportunity. Survival without victory. The boss turns away from the table for the last time. Not in triumph, in conclusion. He walks toward the side corridor that leads away from the public rooms, away from eyes, away from structure. The cleaner hesitates only a fraction of a second before following. No one stops her now. No one dares. The corridor is narrow. Fluorescent lights buzz overhead. The sound feels louder here, more honest. They walk in silence for several steps. Then he stops. He turns to face her fully for the first time. Not as a cleaner, not as a warning, not as a variable, as a person who changed the trajectory of his life with a single observation. He studies her face, the exhaustion she carries carefully, the restraint, the intelligence sharpened by necessity, not privilege. He asks, "What do you want?" It's not rhetorical. It's the most dangerous question he's ever asked anyone. She blinks, surprised by its simplicity, by the absence of conditions. She doesn't answer immediately, not because she's afraid, because she's honest enough to check herself first. Then she speaks. A life that doesn't listen for footsteps. The words land quietly. They don't accuse, they don't demand, they don't beg, they describe. He understands instantly. Footsteps mean anticipation, calculation, fear. Footsteps mean measuring time by proximity to danger. It's a life lived in reaction. He has lived that life longer than she has. He nods once, not in agreement, in recognition. The building behind them continues to adjust. Messages are already being sent, decisions rewritten. The system is correcting course. It always does. He knows what will happen next. If he stays visible, the system will recover and tighten. It will adapt around him, turn him back into a symbol, something to orbit, something to replace when convenient. If he leaves now quietly, without spectacle, without blood, without closure, the system will hesitate again. It will argue with itself, delay, reassign. That delay is a kind of victory. He takes off his jacket. It's a small act, symbolic maybe, or practical. He folds it once and sets it on a side table. He leaves his phone on top of it. No tracking, no reach. The cleaner watches, understanding the weight of the gesture. This is not escape. This is severance. Go, he says to her. She doesn't move. You don't owe me anything, he adds. I know, she says. That's when he realizes she's not staying because she's unsure, she's staying because she's choosing. They walk out together through a service exit. No cameras, no witnesses. The night air hits them both at once. Cooler, cleaner. For the first time in hours, there is no countdown, no pressure behind the eyes, no sense of being hunted. Just the city, indifferent, alive. He stops again at the edge of the alley. "This doesn't end danger," he says. She meets his gaze. "I know. It ends this version of it." That she understands. They walk away in the same direction, not side by side, not touching, just aligned. Behind them, the building seals itself up. The system recalibrates. Somewhere inside, someone else is already being considered. But tonight, there is no brutality, no blood, no final blow. Only a clean break. And a choice made without witness.
The room is quiet, but the quiet carries weight. Every man and woman who has ever counted on him senses the shift before they understand it. They feel it in the tilt of his shoulders, the deliberate pace of his steps, the way his gaze no longer rests on them, but on something beyond their reach. He moves through the halls of the organization as though he is already outside it. Offices he has walked past 1,000 times now feel alien. The walls, lined with accolades, contracts, and carefully curated trophies of control, are just surfaces. Nothing belongs to him anymore, or rather, nothing will if he stays. He stops at a central terminal. Fingers hover over screens that once dictated empires. He doesn't need to touch them. With a few precise commands, he transfers control. Shell accounts, front companies, territories, everything is rerouted. Power will persist, but it will no longer orbit him. The system hums in response, obedient to procedure. The men around him watch. Analysts freeze in disbelief. Some murmur that it can't be done, but he ignores them. He closes accounts, locks doors, severs access. Each keystroke, each command is measured, clean, methodical. Quiet authority radiates from him, even in leaving. No explosions, no gunfire, no declarations. Just a man stepping aside while the world continues, uncertain if he will return. Outside, the city waits like a patient predator. Night has settled fully, streetlights casting long shadows across wet asphalt. The air is sharp, carrying the faint hum of traffic, distant sirens, and the occasional shout that does not reach him. He walks toward the exit alone, no guards, no entourage. Nothing remains but presence and purpose. She waits. Near the side door, tucked in the shadow of the alley, careful not to be seen by anyone who might still be loyal to him, careful not to be noticed by those who might be watching. Her posture is relaxed, but alert, the blue and black uniform muted in the streetlight. She does not step forward. She does not speak. She simply watches. He sees her. Only then does he slow. He stops a few feet away, letting the distance between them measure the moment. There are no words for what has passed, for what has been understood silently through months of observation, through danger navigated and avoided, through the subtle rhythms of life that he never noticed until she made him see them. "You waited," he says. Not a question, not a statement, a recognition. "I did," she replies. Her voice is soft but steady, carrying the certainty of someone who has chosen to be seen on their own terms. He glances back once at the building behind them, the empire that had consumed him for years. The contracts, the accounts, the network of obedience, all of it remains, operational, unbroken. It doesn't belong to him, and that is precisely the point. "This could have been dangerous," he says. Not to threaten her, to acknowledge the truth, and it could have lasted forever. She watches him closely. "It didn't have to," she says simply. The simplicity of her words cuts deeper than any argument, any threat, any gunfire ever could. It is the first thing that has ever felt like a choice rather than a mandate. He exhales, slowly. Not relief, not regret. Recognition. He has survived, yes, but he has survived his own life, and now he has the option to survive differently. Then what now? He asks. A life that doesn't listen for footsteps, she answers. It is not romantic, not at first. It is practical, strategic, honest. The kind of honesty that comes from being unseen, from observing, from surviving. He nods, understanding more than he ever has before. For months he has been calculating risk, measuring loyalty, weighing danger. All of it pales compared to this, the possibility of choosing a different path, choosing someone who saw him clearly and acted not for power, not for gain, but because it was necessary. He steps closer, slowly, deliberately. The street between them becomes nothing. The night seems to fold inward, holding its breath. You lead the way, he says. Not a command, an agreement, a promise. And then, without hesitation, they walk together, not into wealth, not into influence, not into the shadows of the empire he once ruled, but into the unknown, a life free of calculation, free of constant vigilance, a life he could not have imagined when he first entered these rooms, sat at these tables, and believed control was everything. The city glows around them, lights reflect in puddles, cars pass without pause. The night continues, indifferent to the choices of men and women, to the rise and fall of power. And yet, for the first time, they are not merely surviving, they are choosing. He no longer walks as a symbol, she no longer stands as a silent observer. Together, they navigate the street quietly, their steps measured but unburdened. He is learning how to be human again. She is confirming that some vigilance is worth more than fear. Behind them, the empire waits. Systems operate. Men in still positions of power take note of the absence, but misinterpret it. He doesn't care. He has chosen differently. And in that moment, under the indifferent glow of city lights, the first true breath of freedom enters his lungs. No chase, no revenge, no lingering fear, only movement, only choice. Only the beginning of a life they will craft together. Pulls across the small apartment in uneven patches, soft and quiet. It filters through half-open blinds, brushing the worn wooden floorboards, illuminating dust motes that drift lazily in the air. The city beyond hums with routine. Cars passing, vendors setting up stands, a dog barking in the distance. None of it demands his attention. None of it requires control. He sits at a simple kitchen table, staring at a cup of coffee that has gone cold. The mug is chipped at the rim, an imperfection he would have noticed before, catalogued, corrected. Today, he doesn't care. He watches the steam rise and twist in the morning air, curious how something so ordinary can be almost mesmerizing. The cleaner stands nearby, leaning against the doorframe, blue and black uniform gone, replaced with casual clothes that fit her as comfortably as her confidence. Her hair falls loose around her shoulders. She watches him with quiet amusement. The way he fumbles with the spoon, attempting to stir without spilling, is almost entertaining. Almost. "Careful," she says, voice light, teasing. "You'll flood the table." He glances up, an unfamiliar laugh catching in his throat. It's not sharp, not rehearsed. It's raw, genuine. It surprises him more than it should. "Maybe I'm not built for simple things," he admits, and for once he doesn't feel the need to hide it. She moves closer, holding another cup of coffee. She sets it in front of him without ceremony. "Neither am I, but at least we can learn together." He smiles, small and cautious. A man like him hasn't smiled like this in years, if ever. He looks around the apartment, bare, functional, modest, and realizes it's exactly what he needs. Nothing extravagant, nothing to anchor him to a life he left behind.
Behind him lies an empire, intact but no longer his concern. The systems, the contracts, the men in suits, all still moving, still powerful, but irrelevant to the life he is choosing. Here, in this quiet space, there is no obligation to command. No one expects him to be lethal, clever, or precise. Today, he only has to be himself. She studies him, eyes tracing his movements as he finally takes a sip of the coffee. It's lukewarm, bitter, imperfect. He grimaces and laughs again, shaking his head. She smiles softly, enjoying the rare sight of vulnerability from a man who has spent decades perfecting control. "Do you ever regret it?" she asks, voice gentle. He pauses, coffee in hand, eyes on the rising sun that glints off the window pane. "Regret what? Leaving it all behind? The power, the empire, the people who obeyed you blindly?" He considers it, not with fear, not with longing, but with clarity. "No," he says finally, "I traded control for choice, and choice is rarer than anything I've ever had." She tilts her head, studying him, the weight of that honesty settling in the room. "And me?" He smiles again, not the calculated curve of dominance, but the easy, real one of connection. "You," he says, "made me see what I was missing." They move around the kitchen together in quiet synchronicity, performing simple acts of domestic life, pouring coffee, opening a window, arranging plates. The rhythm is ordinary, but to him it feels monumental. Each small success, a perfectly poured cup, a window latch secured, a chair moved without tipping, is a tiny victory, a reminder that he doesn't need to rule to exist. Outside, the city continues, indifferent. Inside, there is sunlight, laughter, and stillness that is almost sacred. A life stripped of performance, a life stripped of fear, a life where he can finally breathe. She watches him struggle with opening a jar. He grunts, a mixture of effort and frustration, then laughs aloud, startling himself. She shakes her head, smiling. "You've forgotten how to do simple things." "I've forgotten how to do anything simple," he admits, eyes twinkling with amusement. "But I'll learn, slowly." She moves closer, standing beside him, and together they manage the task. It's clumsy, messy, human, and for the first time he feels the weight of years lift. Not because the danger is gone. It isn't. The system he left behind is still alive, still humming, still capable of swallowing men whole, but it doesn't touch him here. Not now. He looks out the window. Sunlight warms his face. The city stretches endlessly beyond, indifferent yet inviting. And he realizes that power is not what he wanted. Wealth is not what he desired. Control is irrelevant. What he wants is this: peace, presence, a life chosen freely, and a companion who chose the same. She places a hand lightly on his shoulder. No ceremony, no expectation, just presence. He acknowledges it with a nod, and for the first time, no one fears him. Not guards, not rivals, not the system he once commanded. The coffee sits forgotten as they step to the balcony together. Wind brushes past them. The city glows under the morning sun. He laughs quietly at nothing. She laughs softly beside him. And in that simple, ordinary moment, they are free. Not from enemies, not from danger, not from memory, but from the life that dictated every move he once made. She spoke once. He listened forever. That's not weakness. That's victory. The empire remains silent in its continuity, but he is gone. Not running, not hiding, choosing. And together they walk forward into a life unmeasured by fear, unruled by power, unbound by expectation.